Civic action, delivering on change, what a wonderful concept. And now it is the new initiative of the Social Justice Fund Northwest. This is a project that's going to maximize all the work that was done during the last election when new voters got involved and helped elect a new president. Now they must work on policy in their local level. Along with Western State Center, we've chosen 9 organizations, and we're going to help them do their work even better than they're doing it now. And that technical support that's going to come from the Western State Center is through their project vote, which is important and will help us move into the future.
We actually want a whole different model of how to do civic engagement work. And traditional civic engagement funding, you only get it every 4 years. And it's right before the elections. And that's not going to build your organization, because it's like you do a lot of work for a couple of months and then you're burnt out. And so this is a model that's not been done many places. It's like, okay, we're actually going to fund you year in and year out in non-election years so that you're really thinking about building your membership.
The history of the Social Justice Fund is one of innovation, of investing in individuals and organizations that can and will make changes. Through this new initiative, we're going to be able to do even more with those people in behalf of the community.
We're a multiracial organization that represents low-income to no-income individuals. We are a multi-issue organization.
We work across the state. We're a organization-based group. We have about 32 groups in our organization, including all the major unions in Wyoming, all the major conservation and environmental groups, and then a number of civil and social justice groups, encouraging civic participation. We do citizen lobbies training. We train people how to run grassroots campaigns.
Voter registration, education and mobilization.
We bring together all of the people who are most impacted by the criminal justice system and crime. So we work with people convicted of crime, survivors of crime, and the families of both.
Mobilizing around some pretty destructive ballot initiative measures that'll be on the fall ballot in Washington State. A lot of education, where we're going to be talking to communities that use the services. They're going to be basically cut or completely eliminated, and talking to those people about why they need to really mobilize and get involved in this.
It's a culture, so the culture of civic engagement, and that's what we are seeing people. This is important.
Delivering on change. What does that really mean? Change from what? Change from the policies that have been bad for the communities. Change for the better. Change from despair to hope. That's what this work is about, is changing the hearts and minds of everyone.
When I think about one of our leaders, Gretchen, she, when I first met her, her son actually had just been convicted as, a teenager. And I'll tell you, in Oregon, we have the dubious distinction of charging 15, 16, 17-year-olds as adults for a wide range of crimes. And it's, even though all of the research shows that that's really a bad approach to public safety. Oftentimes, people can stay in that place of devastation and despair.
Reginald and Rosa Beck, and they said, we love that you're doing payday lending, but our family just became homeless because of mortgage lending. They had become homeless because Reginald lost his job when it was outsourced, and they fell behind on their mortgage. And during that process, that company came to them and said, we're gonna help you, we're gonna fix this, we're gonna help you stay in your home, and ended up totally taking advantage of them in a foreclosure rescue scam.
And they were dealing with schools that were literally falling apart. The schools had been far outgrown, and we were seeing fields of portables for students. And the Yakima School District is 63% students of color. But yet the people that were voting on the bonds obviously weren't 63% people of color. We were seeing 20% people of color voting.
The road that we must travel for change is filled with many challenges and obstacles. It's not an easy road to travel, but one that we must travel, and we must travel together. Once the United Farm Workers, years ago when I was an organizer, was having a difficult time with a difficult issue, and we didn't know if we could really succeed. It was then that Dolores Huerta, the vice president and co-founder of the United Farm Workers Union, stood up and said, yes, we can do that. Did not give up hope. Sí se puede, yes, we can. And that became the mantra of the United Farm Workers Union, sí se puede.
The following legislative session, we passed 6 bills that were about accountability to mortgage borrowers. And as we were working to do that, Reginald and Rosa came with us to Olympia. They met with lawmakers, they met with the governor. They spoke at rallies, and they just really got involved in the process, and they were eventually quoted by the governor in the State of the State address.
Gretchen, she became one of our best spokespeople, reaching out in community meetings and bringing people in and rolling up her sleeves and talking to her legislators, and getting more people involved.
And so then we worked to pass a payday lending bill that gives borrowers more time to repay their loans, gives them more options, that helps lower the interest rates. And there's a national expert who's estimated that this payday lending bill will save Washington consumers over $100 million a year in fees.
It was really phenomenal to be able to organize a really massive mobilization for comprehensive reform during a time where anti-immigrants had presented horrible legislation in Congress. And in the state of Idaho, we were able to organize about 15,000 community members to rally against this piece of legislation, which for the state of Idaho, it's actually considered one of the largest rallies, peaceful rallies in the history of the state.
We know that a lot of people on the reservation don't have driver's licenses, and the law was written in such a way that their tribal IDs, which do have photos on them, wouldn't have sufficed to get them into register to vote, and so we were able to hold that off.
CAUSA, on May 1st, gathered thousands of individuals and organizations to raise their voices and hope for comprehensive immigration reform. This is the kind of work that we must also do to let people know that we are not afraid and that we want justice and we want it now.
The city of Yakima, they hadn't passed a bond in almost 20 years. We ended up passing the bond with nearly 70% approval. They'll be building 2 brand new schools, and both of those schools have predominantly students of color attending.
In Oregon, the Partnership on Safety and Justice had one of its greatest victories in the last 10 years. They were able to stop a punitive mandatory sentencing law that would have cost the state $2 billion in the next 10 years. The Montana Women Vote organization had a recent victory, an important victory. They were able to get their state legislature to ensure 30,000 additional children, plus get 3% increase for education.
One story that I've heard 1,000 times, but it never impacts me any less, is having a family member kind of turn to us with tears in their eyes and say, this is the first time I realized that I could stay living in this community.
These are the kind of wins and victories that we must share with others.
Kind of your ideal situation sometimes when someone can go from being a non-voter to someone who wants to engage their community on an issue, but I think it just comes down to finding things that relate to people's daily lives and putting out a welcome mat for them to get involved and encouraging that.
If you treat people like engaged voters and you assume that people want to be a part of the process, and they would be a part of the process if they had tools and information, if you treat them with that in mind and give people tools and information, they become engaged as citizens and they engage in the process.
The Social Justice Fund has always recognized the importance of recentering marginalized communities and making sure that those communities can speak for themselves, and investing in infrastructure there, whether it's general support grants or it's emergency assistance grants to help you get through a crisis. The Social Justice Fund has always been there.
There's no question that Social Justice Fund has been core to our founding, our development, and currently our growth.
So Social Justice Fund really has a movement building philosophy.
The Social Justice Fund, its partners, and the organizations we fund share the same dream, and that is providing social justice for everyone. We know that we can do that if we work together. It's not going to be easy, but anything is possible when we work in coalitions. You know, we can deliver on change through civic action. Civic action delivering on change. Remember, oh yes, we can.